Hi, I'm Valerie Reid, and tonight I'm going to read you a good chunk of chapter 11 from a book I absolutely love called Boy's Life by Robert McCammon, not to be confused with A Boy's Life by Tobias Wolff. This book, Boy's Life, was published in 1992, and it is the story of a boy growing up in a small Alabama town in the 60s. The town's name is Zephyr. And in the summer of 1964, he's 11 years old, and it's a fascinating summer because many things happen in his small town, including murder and some other crimes that present a mystery to be solved. And in this book, his eyes become open to the forces of good and evil that exist in his town, and he has to confront some of these shadows or some of these secrets that are in the shadows. And it's a fun read. Anyway, it's chapter 12, and it is called Welcome Lucifer, because this is the summer that the Beach Boys came out with I Get Around. And apparently it caused a lot of chaos in some of the churches. So the boy's name is Corey. He's sitting there eating his breakfast, and he says, I finished off my eggs and then said something that caused Mom to look at me as if I just requested money for a trip to the moon. I want to hear what Reverend Blessed has to say. She remained speechless. About that song, I continued. I want to know why he hates it so much. Angus Blessed hates everything, Mom said when she had recovered her voice. He can see the end of the world in a pair of penny loafers. Well, that's my favorite song. I want to find out what he can hear in it that I don't. That's easy. He's got old ears. She offered a faint smile. Like me, I guess. I can't abide that song either, but I don't think there's anything evil in it. I want to know, I persisted. For me, this was a first. I had never been so adamant about attending church before, and it wasn't even our congregation. When Dad got home, he tried his best to talk me out of it by saying that Reverend Blessed was so full of hot air, he could blow up a blimp, that he wouldn't even think about crossing the threshold of Reverend Blessed's church, and so on. But at last, after a hushed conference with Mom, Dad grudgingly agreed to go with us on Wednesday night. And so it was. We found ourselves sitting with about 100 other people in the sweltering hot box of the Freedom Baptist Church on Shawshon Street. We saw a lot of people we knew, and before the service began, the place was standing room only, including a lot of sullen teenagers who looked as if they'd been dragged into church on nooses by their cheerless parents. I guess the Reverend's urgent hollering had gotten his message across, as had the signs he'd posted all over town that proclaimed he would be wrestling with the devil on Wednesday night. Our children are worth the fight. A record player and speakers had been set up in the front of the church, and at long last, Reverend Blessed, flush-faced and sweating in a white suit and a rose-colored shirt, strode out onto the podium with the offending 45 RPM disc of black vinyl in one hand. In the other, he held the leather grip of a wooden box with small holes on its side, which he placed on the floor out of the way. Then he grinned at his audience and hollered, "Are we ready to fight Satan tonight, brothers and sisters?" "Amen," they shouted back. "Amen and amen." They were ready, all right. Reverend Blessed began with an impassioned sermon about how the evils of the big city were creeping into Zephyr, how Satan wanted to drag all the young people into hell, and how the citizens had to fight the devil every minute of their lives to keep from being fried in fire. Reverend Blessed's face sweated and his arms flew this way and that, and he paced back and forth before the congregation like a man possessed. I have to say, he put on a great show, and I was more than half convinced that Satan was hiding under my bed, waiting for me to open a National Geographic to one of the naked bosom pictures. He stopped pacing and grinned out at us with his glistening face. The doors had been propped open, but the heat was stifling and the sweat was sticking my shirt to my skin. In the hazy golden light, Reverend Blessed was steaming. He held up the record. "You came to hear it, and hear it you shall." He switched on the record player, put the disc down on its thick spindle, and held the needle over the first groove. "Listen," he said, "to the voices of the demons." Then he lowered the needle, and a static of scratches clicked through the speakers. Those voices, demons or angels, oh, those voices. "Round, round, get around, I get around. Way out of town, I get around." "Did you hear it?" He jerked the needle up. "Right there, telling our children that the grass is greener on the other side of the fence, that they're not to be satisfied living in their own hometown anymore. It's devil's wanderlust they're singing about." Again, the needle went down. When the song reached the part about having a car that's never been beat and never missing yet with the girls we meet, Reverend Blessed was almost dancing with delirious rage. "Hear it? Doesn't that tell our young people to race their cars in the street? Doesn't that tell them to indulge in free and easy pleasures of the flesh?" He said it like a sneer. "Think of it, folks. Your sons and daughters inflamed by this garbage and Satan just laughing at us all. Picture our streets running red with the blood of our children in wrecked hot rods and your pregnant daughters and sex-mad sons. You think such things happen only in the big city? You think we here in Zephyr are safe from the Prince of Darkness? You listen to some more of this so-called music and you'll find out how wrong you are." He let the needle play some more. The sound wasn't very good. I think Reverend Blessed himself had listened to the song a few dozen times, judging from all the scratches. I don't care what he said. The music was about freedom and happiness, not about crashing cars in the street. I didn't hear the song like Reverend Blessed did. To me, it was the sound of summer, a slice of heaven on earth. To him, it was all stinking brimstone and the devil's leer. I had to wonder how a man of God like he was could hear Satan's voice in every word. Wasn't God in control of everything, like the Bible said? If God was, then why was Reverend Blessed so scared of the devil? "Heathen trash!" he roared at the part of the record where the Beach Boys sang about not leaving their best girl home on a Saturday night. "Sex garbage! God help our daughters!" "The man," my father said as he leaned toward Mom, "is as crazy as a one-legged toad frog." As the song played, Reverend Blessed raged on about disrespect for the law and the destruction of the family, about Eve's sin and the serpent in the Garden of Eden. He was spouting spittle and flinging sweat, and his face got so red I feared he was going to explode at the seams. "The Beach Boys," he said with another ferocious sneer. "You know what those are? They're bums who wouldn't know a good day's work if you handed them a hoe and paid them $50. They lay around all day out there in California and fornicate in the sand like wild beasts, and this is what our young people are listening to day and night. God help this world." "Amen," somebody shouted. The crowd was getting worked up. "Amen, brother," another voice yelled. "You ain't heard nothing yet, my friends," Reverend Blessed hollered. He picked up the needle, put his hand flat against the record to keep it from turning, and as the player's gears whined in protest, he searched for a groove on the disc. "Listen to this." He disengaged the gears and he lowered the needle while his other hand rotated the record backwards. What came out in a slow groan was "Da deal sama stra ba." "Hear it? Hear it?" The Reverend's eyes glittered with triumph. He had unlocked the mystery at the music's heart. "The devil is in my strawberry." That's what they said, clear as a bell. They're singing a song in praise of Satan, and they don't care who knows it. And this thing is going out on the radio waves all over the country right at this very minute. It's being played by our children, and they won't even know what they're hearing until it's too late and there's no turning back. It's the devil's plan to snare their souls. I think they said the same thing about the Charleston, Dad said to Mom, but his was a small voice in the fevered chorus of amens. I sat in that church, and heard the Reverend rage and holler. I saw his face redden and his eyes gleam and the spittle spray from his mouth. I saw that he was a terrified man, and he was stoking the hot coals of terror in his congregation. He skipped the needle around, playing more snippets backward that to me sounded like gibberish, but to him held satanic messages. It occurred to me that he must have spent an awfully long time huddled over that record player, scratching the needle back and forth in search of an evil thought. I wasn't sure he was trying to protect people as much as he was trying to direct them. In this latter area, he was highly successful. Soon, he had most everybody yelling amens like the cheerleaders at Adams Valley High yelled for touchdowns. Dad just shook his head and crossed his arms. I don't think Mom knew what to make out of all this commotion. Then, with sweat dripping from his chin and his eyes wild, Reverend Blessed announced, "Now we'll make the devil dance to his own tune, won't we?" He snapped the wooden box open, and from it jerked something that was alive and kicking. As the Beach Boys continued to croon, Reverend Blessed gripped a leash and made the creature on its other end start dancing crazily to the music. He was a little spider monkey, all gangly arms and legs, and its face spitting with fury as the Reverend jerked its chain this way and that. "Dance, Lucifer!" the Reverend shouted, his voice carrying over even all of those Californicators. "Dance to your music, Lucifer!" Lucifer, who had been cooped up in that cramped box for Lord knew how long, did not look too pleased. The thing hissed and snapped at the air, its tail flailing like a furry gray whip. And Reverend Blessed kept shouting, "Dance, Lucifer, go on and dance," as he wrenched the monkey back and forth on the end of its tether. Some people got up and started clapping and writhing in the aisle. A woman whose stomach looked as big as a sofa pillow got up on her tree trunk legs and staggered around, sobbing and calling for Jesus as if he was a lost puppy. "Dance, Lucifer!" the Reverend yelled. I thought he was going to start swinging that poor monkey around and round his head like a rabbit's foot on a keychain. A man in the row in front of us spread his arms wide and started shouting something with God and praise be and destroy the heathens in it, and I found myself staring at the back of his sun-brown neck to see if I might find an alien X whittled there. The place had turned into a madhouse. Dad reached for Mom's hand and said, "We're getting out of here." People were gyrating and jiggling in rapturous ecstasies, and all this time I thought Baptists couldn't dance. Reverend Blessed gave the monkey a ferocious shake. "Dance, Lucifer," he commanded as the music thundered on. "Show 'em what's in you." And then, quite abruptly, Lucifer did just that. The monkey shrieked and, obviously fed up with the shaking and jerking, sprang for the Reverend's head. Those spidery arms and legs wrapped around the Reverend's skull, and Reverend Blessed squalled with terror as Lucifer sank his sharp little fangs into the Reverend's right ear. At the same time, Lucifer displayed from his rear end exactly what he'd been fed up on, all over the Reverend's white suit. It was a sight that caused all rapture and speaking in tongues to immediately cease. The Reverend was staggering around trying to get that monkey off his head as Lucifer's bowels continued to spray his suit. The woman with a sofa pillow belly screamed. Some men in the front row ran to help the Reverend, whose ear was being chewed ragged. As the men reached the struggling Reverend and the gnawing monkey, Lucifer suddenly turned his head and saw the hands about to grab him. He released his grip from Reverend Blessed's skull, and with a chattering screech, he sprang over the men's head. The leash came loose from Reverend Blessed's hand, and Lucifer was free. Like his nasty namesake, the monkey jumped from person to person, snapping at their ears and spraying their clothes. I don't know what the Reverend had been feeding him, but it must have disagreed with Lucifer's stomach. Mom screamed and Dad dodged as Lucifer sprang past us, and we barely missed getting splashed. Lucifer leaped for the edge of a pew, swung on the light fixture, and then landed on a woman's blue hat where he fertilized a false carnation. Then he was on the move again, paws and claws and whipping tail, snapping teeth, a shriek, a splatter. The smell of rotten bananas was enough to knock you to your knees. Lucifer sank his teeth into a woman's nose, anointed a teenage boy's hair with brown slickum, and leaped from pew to pew like a demonic little version of Fred Astaire. "Get him!" Reverend Blessed shouted, holding his bleeding ear. "Get that damn thing!" A man did get a hand on Lucifer, but he jerked it back a second later with a fang-stung knuckle. The monkey was quick and mean as hell. Most everybody was too busy dodging the flying streams to think about catching Lucifer. I was belly down on a pew, and Dad and Mom crouched in the aisle. Reverend Blessed yelled, "The doors! Somebody shut the doors!" It was a good idea, but it came much too late. Lucifer was already in motion toward the way out, his beady little eyes glittering with delight. Behind him, he left his signature on the walls. "Stop him!" the Reverend hollered, but Lucifer danced over a man's shoulder and swan dived off a woman's head, and with a screech of triumph, he bounded through the open doorway into the night. A few men ran out after him. Everybody else started breathing a lot easier, though the air wasn't fit to breathe. Dad helped Mom to her feet, and then he helped another 2 men pick up the big lady who had fainted and fallen like an oak tree. "Everybody stay calm," the Reverend said shakily. It's all right now. Everything's all right." I wondered about a man who could say that when his ear was half chewed off and his white suit covered with monkey mess. The sinful song we had all gathered to hear was forgotten. That seemed a minor thing now in perspective. People started to get over their shock, and what took its place was indignation. Somebody hollered at Reverend Blessed that he shouldn't have let that monkey get loose, and somebody else said he was sending his cleaning bill over first thing in the morning, and the woman with the bitten nose squawked that she was going to sue. The voices rose and clamored, and I saw Reverend Blessed shrink back from them, all the power sucked out of him. He looked confused and miserable, just like everybody else. The men who'd chased out after Lucifer returned, sweating and breathless. The monkey had scrambled up a tree and gone, they said. Maybe he'd turn up somewhere when it got light, they said. Then maybe they could snare him in a net. People trying to snare Lucifer instead of Lucifer snaring people. That struck me as peculiar and funny at the same time, but Dad put a voice to the thought. "Dream on," he said. Reverend Blessed sat down on the podium. He stayed there in his fouled white suit, and he looked at his hands as his congregation left him. On the record player, the needle ticked, ticked, ticked. We went home through the humid summer night. The streets were quiet, but the symphony of insects droned and keened from the treetops. I couldn't help but think that from one of those trees Lucifer was watching. Now that he had gotten free, who could put him back in his box again? The end.